Let me ask you something. When the most powerful military alliance in human history, the combined air forces, intelligence networks, satellite grids, and precision munitions of the United States of America and the State of Israel, points everything it has at one country, what is supposed to happen? The answer, according to every strategic doctrine written in Washington and Tel Aviv, is simple. That country collapses. Its government falls. Its military disintegrates. Its population staring at rubble loses the will to resist. That is the theory. That is the doctrine. That has been the pattern from Baghdad to Tripoli to Kibble. So here's the question nobody in Western media wants to answer. Honestly, why didn't it happen to Iran? Think about that for a moment. Really think about it. Because what we witnessed is not just a military outcome, it is a civilizational data point.
It is history sending us a message, and that message is this. The model of American power projection that has governed the world since 1991, that model just ran into a wall and the wall didn't move. To understand why Iran survived what no country in the modern era was supposed to survive, you have to stop thinking like a weapons analyst and start thinking like a historian. You have to stop asking how many missiles did Iran have and start asking what does Iran actually want? Because here is the first principle of strategic analysis that Washington forgot or perhaps never understood. A state that knows what it wants and is willing to pay the price to get it is infinitely more dangerous than a state with 10 times the firepower that isn't sure what it's fighting for. Iran knew exactly what it wanted. It wanted to survive. It wanted to control the Strait of Hormuz. It wanted to reduce American influence in the Middle East to a manageable nuisance. And it wanted to demonstrate to every nation watching, and every nation was watching, that the American military guarantee is no longer what it was. Iran didn't need to defeat America in a conventional battle. Iran needed to not lose. And not losing in this strategic context is a form of winning that America has consistently refused to understand. Now let's talk about the structural miscalculation, because this is where the story gets deeply instructive. The United States military operates what I call an inverted pyramid. Air power at the top, naval assets in the middle, ground forces minimized. It is a military designed to look powerful from $30,000 FT. It is optimized for shock, for spectacle, for the kind of warfare that produces dramatic footage and satisfying press conferences. It is not optimized for the grinding, multi-domain, multi-year war of attrition that Iran was always prepared to fight. Wars, real wars, wars that determine the shape of the world are wars of attrition. They are won by the side with the cheapest, most flexible, most motivated resource on the battlefield. And that resource is not an F-35. That resource is a human being who believes in what he is dying for. Israel made a similar category error, and a more emotionally loaded one. Israel has consistently confused tactical precision with strategic clarity. Israel can hit any target on Earth within a margin of meters. Israel cannot answer the question, and then what? Strike the nuclear facilities, and then what? Strike the leadership, and then what? Destroy the missile stockpiles, and then what? The Iranian state is not a building. It is not a server farm. It is not a single general who can be removed by a drone strike. It is a civilization 4,000 years old that has been invaded, occupied, and carved up by empires that no longer exist. Persia outlasted the Greeks. Persia outlasted Alexander. Persia outlasted the Mongols. And Persia outlasted the British. Israel, a state 76 years old, believed it could solve the Iranian equation through engineering. History does not bend to engineering. Here is what the intelligence community in both Washington and Tel Aviv fundamentally misread. They measured Iranian capability and ignored Iranian coherence. They counted missiles and ignored meaning. They tracked centrifuges and ignored culture. There is a concept I want you to hold in your mind. Societal mobilization. It is the degree to which a population will absorb punishment without disintegrating. The United States in its modern wars has operated on the assumption that sufficient pain, economic, military, psychological, will fracture the social contract inside an adversary state. Make the people suffer enough and they will turn on their government. Make the cost high enough and the leadership will capitulate. This theory worked more or less against societies that lacked deep civilizational roots. It has never worked against Iran, not under the Shah, not under the sanctions regime, not under the assassination campaigns, not now. Why? Because Iranian national identity is not a construct of the Islamic Republic. The Islamic Republic is merely the current operating system running on an ancient and extraordinarily resilient cultural hard drive. When bombs fall on Tehran, Iranians do not think the government has failed us. They think the foreigners are here again. And that thought, that single ancient conditioned thought, activates something that no amount of precision munitions can destroy. It activates cohesion. Now let's apply game theory, because game theory is ultimately what this story is about. The United States entered this conflict with a linear escalation model. Step 1, airstrikes. Step 2, economic strangulation. Step 3, decapitation of leadership. Step 4, collapse. It is a ladder, a clean, logical, sequential ladder. The problem is that Iran never agreed to stand on that ladder. Iran played a different game entirely, a game of selective pressure, of calibrated response, of targeting the American escalation calculus itself rather than matching American firepower. Every time the United States moved up a rung, Iran made the cost of the next rung higher, not through force alone, but through geography. The Strait of Hormuz is not a political talking point. It is the jugular vein of the global oil economy. And through proxies and through diplomatic maneuvering and through the simple devastating act of not breaking. And Israel found itself in an even more perilous position because Israel's strategic doctrine has always been built on a foundational premise. Israel cannot absorb a long war. Israel is a small country with a small population and an economy that cannot sustain indefinite mobilization. Israel's entire military philosophy is built on the short, decisive campaign. Strike hard, strike fast, create deterrence, return to normalcy. Iran understood this. Iran had studied this. And Iran did something strategically elegant. It turned Israel's strength into a vulnerability. By refusing to escalate in ways that would justify the short, decisive campaign, and instead maintaining persistent, calibrated pressure across multiple theaters, Iran ensured that Israel could never get the clean, conclusive victory it needed. The war dragged on, and the longer it dragged, the more the domestic pressure inside Israel built, the more the economic toll mounted, and the more the narrative, critically, the narrative shifted. Because here is the dimension of modern warfare that conventional military analysis perpetually underweights the narrative battlefield. Wars today are not decided only by what happens on the ground. They are decided by what populations believe is happening on the ground. The United States entered this conflict with extraordinary narrative advantages. It controlled most of the international media infrastructure. It had the diplomatic relationships. It had the moral framing of non-proliferation and regional security. And it lost the narrative war. It lost it through the accumulating weight of civilian casualties. It lost it through the evidence of infrastructure destruction that the Global South read not as precision targeting, but as collective punishment. It lost it through the visible gap between what American officials said was happening and what journalists, satellites, and social media documented was actually happening. When the narrative fractures, the coalition fractures, and when the coalition fractures, the military operation loses its political oxygen. There is a lesson here that applies far beyond Iran, far beyond the Middle East, far beyond this particular chapter of history. And the lesson is this: the age in which a powerful state could impose its will on a coherent, organized, motivated civilization purely through military and economic coercion, that age is over. Not because the weapons are less powerful. The weapons are more powerful than ever. But because the conditions that made coercive power decisive, information monopoly, global institutional legitimacy, unchallenged narrative control, allied unity, those conditions have eroded. The world is more multipolar than it has been at any point since 1945. And in a multipolar world, resilience beats dominance. Iran didn't win because Iran is stronger than America. Iran didn't win because Iran's missiles are better than Israel's. Iran won because Iran understood the game being played. While America and Israel were still playing a game from a previous era, Iran understood that the objective was not to match Western firepower. The objective was to outlast Western political will. And political will in democratic societies, subject to elections and economic pressures and media cycles and the exhaustion of populations that never wanted another Middle Eastern war. Political will is the most fragile resource in modern geopolitical conflict. America wanted regime change. Israel wanted denuclearization. Iran wanted survival. And when you map those three objectives against each other through the lens of game theory, through the lens of history, through the lens of civilizational endurance, the outcome was never as unpredictable as the analysts in Washington and Tel Aviv wanted us to believe. The side fighting for survival, fighting on its own soil, fighting with the weight of 4,000 years of civilizational memory. That side has an advantage that no weapon system can neutralize and no sanctions regime can erode. It is called will, and Iran never ran out of it. What you are watching unfold in real time is not simply the outcome of one military conflict. It is the recalibration of global power. It is the moment when the unipolar fantasy, the belief that one power or one alliance could indefinitely enforce its preferences on the rest of the world through the threat of overwhelming force, collides with the reality that the world has changed. The nations of the global south are watching. China is watching. Russia is watching. Every government that has ever been on the receiving end of an American ultimatum is watching. And what they are seeing is this: it is possible to say no. It is possible to absorb the pressure. It is possible to survive the unthinkable if you know what you are fighting for. If your society holds together, and if you are patient enough to let the other side's political will collapse before yours does. History does not move in straight lines. Empires do not fall overnight, but they do fall. And the pattern of their falling is remarkably consistent across centuries and civilizations. They overextend. They misread their adversaries. They mistake technological superiority for strategic wisdom. They confuse the ability to inflict punishment with the ability to achieve objectives. And eventually they meet a civilization that simply will not break. And in that meeting, something fundamental shifts, something that cannot be unshifted.